Yes. Okay, I'm going to turn
Okay.
this over to Matt.
All right. So Scott, I'm going to ask you a question. There's a certain aspect of it's a little more complicated. And if people are early in recovery, it can be, I mean, it's actually just a really difficult thing. But essentially, there's a concept in empathy that I've been spending a lot of time trying to teach people. And so I can dive into that. Or the other thing I was thinking about talking about was trying basically learning to be more present with your spouse. And so I'm curious. The empathy one's a little more complicated, but but
I'm actually
any
going to
thoughts?
say empathy because part of empathy is being present with the other person. So
You know what? You're
we may
right.
end up covering them both. But I'm going to say let's do the empathy.
Okay, so the when I teach empathy, one of the things that I try and help people understand is that you don't have to agree with the other person in order to empathize. I've realized though that what I end up hearing, so I'll teach that concept to people, and then I end up hearing, well, I, well, I'll hear it like this. Well, Matt said that I don't have to agree with you. And so what they'll say is, but I understand you. I don't have to agree, but I understand you. And it actually doesn't change anything in the dynamic to actually lower the conflict and create more connection with the couple. And so I've had to sit with what is going on there. And I what I'm realizing is that as I'm teaching people that concept that you don't have to agree in order to empathize, they're moving into a headspace that is more like uh agree to disagree. Well, I agree to disagree. There is no empathy in I agree to disagree. What we are doing when we say I agree to disagree is we are essentially shutting down the conversation and saying I can't connect with you and you can't connect with me, so we're not talking about it. And I'm not suggesting that sometimes that's not the best conversation to have. I sometimes wish that all the political warriors on the internet would just say I agree to disagree and stop the conversation because you all sound like a bunch of idiots arguing about things rather than trying to understand each other. Um, and so there are times where I agree to disagree is great, but agree to disagree or I understand what you're saying, I just don't agree with you is not empathy. What it would actually look like, and it's going to be hard for me to demonstrate it, but I'm going to try, is if I understand you, but I don't agree with you, I get to a space emotionally when we're having a conversation where I recognize that maybe I think I understand where you're coming from. That's another thing that I'm getting a little bit more sensitive to is that people are like, "Oh, I understand." And I don't think inherently there's anything wrong with telling another person I understand, but you if you actually understand, show them you understand. Show them by saying, if I hear you correctly, you're describing it like this. Am I understanding that? Yes. Okay, is there anything about what I'm saying that would make you feel like I don't understand? So I'm slowing down in the process of understanding. And if I say I understand, I'm following it up with, so let me make sure I understand. Let me slow way down. And I'm asking questions. Is there any part of what you're sharing that you don't feel like I understand? Some of that I'm doing just to help tease it out of them. And a lot of times, as I'm working through somebody, trying to understand them and empathize with them, and think about it as a clinician, I'm doing that constantly because I can't help somebody figure out what needs healing if I don't understand what they view as their problem. Um, and I mean, I had a funny call yesterday of a potential new client who asked me a simple question. Uh, at what location is your workshop? And I said, oh, it's in the room next to my office across the lobby. And they're like, well, yeah, but where's your office? And I had just told them that most couples don't struggle with communication, they struggle with listening. And so I laughed and I said, man, for somebody who just told you guys that most people struggle with listening, I just did a terrible job. And so we chuckled. And then I told them the location of my office, the crossroads, and it was good. And so too often we speak too quickly instead of really slowing down. So I realize I'm rambling a little bit, but hopefully you guys are tracking. So when I'm slowing down to understand and I'm not agreeing, I'm I'm teasing out, asking questions, trying to say, hey, is there any parts that I don't understand? And I'm also paying attention to my confusion. If I'm noticing that I'm still confused, I do not have the full amount of empathy that I need to have. So I'm going to ask questions, get curious until I am able to go, oh, what you're telling me is this. And when they go, yes. And then I'm like, no wonder why you feel this way. It makes sense now to my brain how you came to the conclusion that I was being a jerk. Okay. So, like, whatever it is, I'm like, oh, as soon as I go, boop, light bulb, you make sense to me, I can still disagree, meaning I can see how you interpreted what I was doing as I was being a jerk. And I can still go, and I don't agree that that's what I was doing, but you now explained it in such a way that I get you. So I can have a different opinion on what happened or what I believe. I might even say to myself, I would prefer you don't take the opinion that you have, but it makes sense why you have it. If you knew my heart and my intention, you know I wasn't trying to be a jerk. And so I don't agree with your conclusion, but I get you. I see why you got to that conclusion. It's only at that point that I can have empathy and disagree with you. Does that make sense? And so in trying to teach you guys all of this, um, if you have confusion as to how they got to their conclusion, or if you find yourself saying, well, let me just explain myself, and if I explain myself, you'll change your opinion, you still don't have the full amount of empathy, I should say. Because if I can say to you, it makes sense how you got to your conclusion, I'd love to share with you what was really going on for me. And if you still don't agree, it makes sense to me why you still retain that conclusion, even if what I've now determined in my head is, well, you just find it hard to trust me. So I don't agree. I'm a trustworthy person. I don't feel like I've done anything to betray your trust, but you have enough trust issues in your life with people who have betrayed you. I don't blame you for not trusting me. So now I agree, I understand you, but still don't agree with your conclusion. Even if I explain my position, I can still understand why you might feel differently. Now, maybe you guys think that this is black belt kung fu level of empathy, and maybe it is, but I still think it's important as a practice for us to learn how to get there. Because again, if we tell ourselves, um, I understand you, and let me explain to you why you're wrong, then we really aren't getting to the deepest level of empathy we can. So, with that, Scott, what are your thoughts?
Well, yeah, I mean, empathy is not about if Matt's trying to explain his feelings to me about something, if I have empathy, I am focused on understanding what you're thinking and feeling, not on changing your opinion, even if I agree with you or disagree with your opinion. You know, he thinks I did something that was intentionally hurtful, and I know it wasn't intentionally hurtful, but at least I can say, I understand why that was hurtful. And I understand, given our past history, like we're in a relationship and I cheated on him 103 times. I mean, something like why you might think it was intentional, or that I wasn't, keeping your safety and well-being at the forefront. I understand, but but I really wasn't. And but at least if I understand, there's something about being understood that is more powerful than being apologized to, I think. I mean, would you agree with that?
Well, oh yeah, I'm trying to remember. I think I went through maybe I didn't. I'd have to look back through the videos, but I did a video, I think, on the 5 different apology styles.
Right.
And what I've found most of the time, sure, some people want an apology that has accountability. Other people want an apology that has, a plan for restitution, right? We have these different things,
Right.
but most of the time, I feel like every apology is most powerful if I understand you, right? And I found that most de-escalation when I work with people is done through understanding them, and only after they feel understood is an apology even appropriate.
Right.
Because if I apologize before I understand you, I'm most likely just trying to appease you,
Yeah.
which isn't about apologizing. It's about managing your emotions.
Yeah, I talk to my guys in work groups all the time, and one of the things, somebody will say, "Oh, my wife accused me of this, and I didn't do it. How do I handle that?" I'm like, "Well, first of all, you have to, say, I just, you have to check in, like, what is it that they're mad about? Oh, you took a longer glance at the waitress than she would have liked. Oh, okay. Maybe I did look for an extra second. I'm sorry, she is very pretty. You must be feeling them. I shouldn't even throw in the I'm sorry, we're not ready for that. What you must be feeling is like you might be afraid that I'm acting out again. You might be worried that I find her more attractive than you. You might be judging yourself. What are you feeling? Can you tell me? And there needs to be a back and forth. And if I truly understand what my partner is thinking and feeling, like, my partner says, yeah, I'm feeling less than, and I'm scared you're going to act out again, and I'm scared you're lying to me. I'm scared you're already acting out again. Am I going to have to divorce you? And if I divorce you, I'm having all these thoughts. And then I can say, oh my God, I really did not mean to make you feel that way. Um,
Yeah, I am so sad
right.
that you feel
And
insecure
then
because of my behavior.
do not, oh no, I'm going to correct you on this one.
Do it.
My mother taught me how to apologize without apologizing. Oh, I'm so sorry you're so angry. I'm so sorry you feel so angry. I'm so sorry you're so insecure. It's not an apology, it's a
Well, if you heard me, I'm sad that my actions created insecurity within you. That's what I
that's
was
the way
trying
to
to
do it.
communicate.
Right. But you said it the way
Yeah,
my mother
right.
used to
Like
say
I rec Oh,
it.
did I?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
sorry you're so
Yeah,
insecure. And that's totally like,
yeah, I'm sad. Yeah, right. The way that I was intending it, right, was
yeah,
I'm sad that I triggered the insecurity within you that because of
yeah,
my previous behavior is obvious why you feel insecure, right?
yeah.
Like,
And then I can actually give, that's the apology. And, to me, an apology is not complete unless I try to make it right. Here's what I'm doing to change this behavior. I am aware that sometimes my glances linger too long and it's inappropriate. And I'm really working on that. I'm talking to my sponsor about it. I talked to my therapist about it. You know, I'm going to my 12th, then it actually means something. But it doesn't mean something. Men, I work always with the guys. Um, they want to skip that feeling step. They want to skip the empathy part of the apology. They want to do, yep, I did it. I'm going to do this to fix it. And they want to skip
oh,
that
yeah.
middle part with the feelings. And the apology rings hollow usually.
Well, and a lot of times I think they want to skip it because they don't know that it exists. And why I say that is they haven't gotten to a space within themselves to recognize that there is a space full of feelings. For them, it's there's a mistake, you're upset, let me solve it so that we don't have to deal with the discomfort, or
Right.
it should have been dealt with because I apologize. We're good, right?
Yeah. And I'm going to generalize for a second. I mean, women are much more hardwired for emotional empathy than men
Even
are.
though even though there are plenty of men who are more emotional and plenty of women who are more uh less emotional.
Yeah, but in a yeah, and you're absolutely
But
right. But in a stereotypically,
stereotypically,
if you got like six women sitting around a table and one of them has just gotten a medical diagnosis that's bad, they'll process feelings.
right.
If you get six men around the same table with the same diagnosis for one of them, it's like, wow, that sucks. Who's your doctor? Are you doing chemo or radiation? I mean, that's the conversation. Like, let's just fix it. How are we going to fix it? There's
Right.
no feelings. Um, we're not socialized that way. We're not right. And there are brain differences between men and women. The left and right hemisphere, we have a thicker corpus callosum. I mean, they don't communicate as well. But anyway, that's way off topic. But men can and women who are empathy can be learned, right? Yes, no,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Empathy is a skill.
yeah,
Even they say even sociopaths can learn it, right? Like, whereas they may not necessarily even feel it.
right.
I've always had a hard time with that because I think so much of empathy is about feeling, but technically it's a skill set that anybody can learn.
Yeah. um, Technically. But let me ask you this question. We just type your questions into the Q&A about this or anything to do with relationships and addiction and recovery. But let me ask you this question, Matt. Is there a difference between intellectual empathy and what I call emotional empathy? I mean, I know that physical empathy is, if a man gets hit in the groin, every man in the vicinity immediately grabs his own groin and goes, "Oh, that's physical empathy." Um, Men are good at physical empathy, um, but it's the first we often lack emotional empathy, especially if we're addicted, because I'm not in touch with my own feelings. How could I be in touch with yours? So I have to learn intellectual empathy. I'm sort of answering the question I asked you, but getting from here to here, intellectual to emotional, how does that happen?
Well, it's interesting because I don't, as I sat there, I'm thinking the way you're describing physical empathy, right? When we see somebody else get hurt, typically we're gonna like recognize that hurt and feel it. And I think logically there is going to be a difference between intellectual empathy, like mentally, I can uh, try to imagine what it feels like, and that's where I've always struggled because there's certain people I've talked to over the years who have said, well, unless you've gone through what I've gone through, you can't imagine. And there's a part of me that's like, well, in that case, no one can have empathy for anyone else because no two of us have gone through the same things. And so I think we need to look at it bigger and say, no, like, um, so for instance, I've never lost a child outside of the womb, if that makes any sense. Like, experienced some miscarriages, my wife has, and but at the same time, I've imagined what it would be like to lose one of my children, and I can imagine how terribly painful that would feel. And so, even though I've never fully gone through that experience, there's a part of me that can emotionally tap into that. I've lost other things, and I would imagine that magnifying that to an incredible degree. Now, what I'm not dumb enough to say to somebody is, I can imagine exactly what you're going through. It's like, no, I can imagine that how painful it is, and you're probably feeling some of this and that, and tell me more about what you're feeling that I don't yet understand. And so you get to this place where intellectually and then integrating it emotionally, where you tap into things that you can relate to and magnify and imagine. And so I think people can be that's a skill that has to be grown, you know. Um, if for instance somebody said, "Well, I've never had a spouse cheat on me. I don't know how painful that is," and I'm like, did you ever have a boyfriend or girlfriend that broke up with you? Remember how painful that was? Well, could you imagine what it'd be like if they broke up with you by cheating on you with your best friend or, whatever? Like, and you can get to a space where it's like, wow, I've never thought about it that way. And it's like, yeah, so you're emotionally and intellectually getting to a place where those two things are coming together and you can tap into a certain sense of what it must be like for that person. Um,
Yeah.
and I think most of us can learn to do that, but it does take a certain level of imagination, and that is a practice and a practice, a skill that is worked on and developed.
Yeah. Um, and that's kind of, to me, that's the intellectual part. Like I can reason of my way through it and be like, oh, this happened, when this so and so lied to me, I felt this. You might be feeling the same way because of my lies.
Mhm.
Um, is that true? But that's still intellectual. I mean, true empathy is the emotional empathy is when I'm actually feeling your pain with you. Um, like you're in pain and I'm in pain, and it's
Right.
kind of automatic.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting though is you say it's automatic because in my brain, as
Yeah,
I'm kind of processing through. There's plenty of times I've been sitting with a client and they're telling me something and I'm not feeling it. Like I can tell they're hurting. I can
right,
see it. In my mind, I'm thinking intellectually, I can see what they're going through.
right,
And then once I get curious enough, I don't know if this is how it works for everybody, but once I get curious enough and I can then feel it and I'm like, "Whoa, okay. I'm now clued in enough to what you're experiencing that I'm feeling it with you." So to
right.
me, um, I guess I'm having a hard time because most of the time when I'm really leaning into empathy, there are times where intellectually I'll be empathetic, but it's often. I mean, I've run into people in the grocery store, and next thing you know, we're talking and they're telling me a story. I don't want to dive into the emotional empathy because, uh, well, I don't mean this in a bad way. I do it all day long at work, and they're not paying me, and I can be intellectually like, "Oh my gosh, that sounds terrible. Wow,
Right.
like we chat or
Sympathy.
whatever." I don't want to feel deep down.
Right.
And
I'll be
so
sympathetic, but not empathetic. Yeah.
Right, but you're still creating a distinction between intellectual and emotional on the empathy side?
Well, we just had Olympic trials all over TV. Say I'm a parent and my 20-year-old is uh, in the Olympic trials and misses the 100-meter backstroke by 1/1000th of a second and gets out of the water and is just crestfallen. What am I feeling? I'm feeling crestfallen with my child because I care about, I'm
Right.
probably not feeling crestfallen about the kid who came in fourth by 3/100ths of it or something.
Yeah.
I might be sympathetic, but I'm actually feeling the same pain that my child is feeling for
Right.
having just missed,
Oh, totally.
is I think what betrayed partners tend to want. I really want you to get my pain. I'm having a
Well,
physical reaction. I want you to have a physical
yeah,
reaction. You know,
and
that's where I'm talking about like the 12-inch drop from.
and I think that when I was describing it, I was working through intellectual to
Two.
emotional and how that works. And I would say when I'm doing recovery work specifically, to have that 12-inch drop, as you say, um unfortunately takes a lot of time because usually you have to help the partner who did the betraying get out of their own shame, their own defensiveness, and get into a lot more of their own accountability and and even their own self-compassion
Yeah.
before they can ever drop into a sustainable emotional empathy. And I'm not saying they aren't feeling it once in a while,
Right.
but to have that be sustainable takes a lot of work.
Yeah. And that was kind of what I was asking you, because addicts, I mean, addiction is about escaping my own emotions. Uh, and I
And
had
if they've used it their
25,
whole
30
life.
years of practice of that. And
Yeah,
suddenly you want me to not only feel my own emotions, but feel yours too. This is going to be hard.
yeah, it's not like they just wake up one day and go, "All right, I choose to be empathetic with you." Like, it has to be a learned skill, and if somebody's been using, some behavior their whole life to escape emotion, then not only do they have to not use that behavior anymore, but then develop the emotional skill set and experience to then eventually get to a spot where they can start to feel emotionally connected. And it takes a lot of energy, a lot of practice. A lot of times it's right when you're going to 12 step. And this is what I find interesting. A lot of spouses or people will be like, well, go to 12 step and do the steps and all of those things are wonderful, but sometimes I'm encouraging them, go talk to other people who are struggling, share what you're struggling, just to develop the skill of empathy, just to develop the skill of connecting on a deeper emotional level. And sometimes you can sit in a group of people and watch them go around in a circle talking about their experience. And you do that week after week, night after night, day after day, before you go, oh my gosh, I'm feeling this.
Right.
I'm developing an emotional language that is very different than anything I've ever understood.
Yeah.
But it just it's practice, practice, practice.
Yeah. And for the addicts who are tuning in here, I will speak from personal experience. I mean, I did not get into recovery because I wanted to have empathy, but I would not trade the empathy that I do experience now for anything. Empathy is connection in a way that I was never connected in my addiction. This is something to strive for, is what I'm saying, um, at least from my
Oh,
perspective.
absolutely.
Okay.
I giggled because I can't imagine somebody going, I think I'm gonna give up the sexual compulsivity I've had my whole life or the alcohol I've been doing my whole life because I want to take a journey down empathy road.
Yeah.
Like,
It just wasn't at
that's
the
not
forefront.
happening.
I just wanted my consequences to go away, you know? It's like, just stop yelling at me. That's what I'm aiming for right now. Yeah.
Right.
Should we jump into the Q&A?
Let's do it.
Okay, so type questions into the Q&A. We've got a couple now. This first one, we have been married for 27 years. Initial disclosure happened 7 months ago. I don't know if that's discovery or disclosure. I'm going to say discovery probably. Happened 7 months ago, and the addict's behaviors were completely hidden. We are just now getting into recovery with our CSATs. Could you advise us on the appropriate ways to help our adult children, 25, 22, and 20, understand what we are going through? They are often surprised and confused when we need to cancel or change plans, or can't watch the usual TV shows with them, or can't all go to the beach together. The roller coaster of emotions I'm going through as the partner is really hard at this time, and the kids are worried about what's going on and if we are okay as a couple.
Oh, I love this question
Yeah.
because I don't think it comes up enough, but it's interesting how often I have to guide this one. So first of all, so I'm trying to remember. There was a period of time, 80s and 90s, I believe, where the standard kind of rule was disclose everything to your children. And one of the things they've since learned was how damaging that could be. And so what where we stand now as a community is only tell them as much as they want to know. And so what I would do is uh I would suggest you talk to each of them individually. You sit each of them down and say, we are going to talk to each one of you individually. So for until we tell you, don't talk to your sibling. about this. We're not trying to keep it a secret, but we also are only telling each of you as much as you feel you want to know. So please respect your siblings and don't share more detail. And if they ask you a question and you know the answer, tell them, you know, it's a great question. Ask mom or dad, or ask mom and dad. So don't be revealing what we're about to share with you or what you end up getting from us to them, and ask them to come talk to us. We're not keeping secrets, but we just want to respect everybody's level of what they want to know and understand. And then I would start out and say, how are we as a couple? Well, we are working really hard to repair issues that we've had in our relationship. We've recently discovered some struggles that have happened in the relationship. And so we are both doing therapy and other meetings to try and make the repairs so that we can have a strong relationship better than we did before. How much information do you feel that you want to know, son or daughter? Because you have a right to decide how much you want to know. Now, with that being said, you guys have to decide as a couple, how much info do we want to share, right? So I would try to give them if they want it. I mean these are all 25, 22 and 20-year-old kids. Like, these are adults. And so I would give them enough information if they ask for it to be clear, such as there was infidelity. Well, tell me the details. Well, the truth is we don't think the details need to be shared. As we are working through this, the infidelity didn't happen with someone that you know, and so we don't feel it's necessary to share it, right? Like, I understand you might want the information, but as a husband and wife, I'm making a judgment here. As a husband and wife, we've decided that all the specific details aren't going to be helpful for either one of us, and so we're being honest about the infidelity. Um, but as far as specific details, I appreciate you wanting to know. We are not comfortable sharing that at this time. We'll let you know if something changes. So you're giving them as much information as they want, but not more information that you're also comfortable sharing. Now, that doesn't mean, well, we're not comfortable sharing anything, let's not tell them anything. And it's like, no, that doesn't, unless you want to carry on a family system where secrets are kept, that doesn't work either. And so this is such a complicated thing. I hope I'm helping you understand the various steps to take. And so then you go through each kid and have those conversations, and you let each of them know your siblings might know more information than you're asking for. Make sure to tell them that you don't want to hear anything more, and that if you do, you'll come talk to us. So you have a right to decide how much information you want or don't want. And if they all say, well, tell us as much as you're telling everybody, right? Okay, so then you tell them all the same, and you let all of them know, hey, everyone knows. So if you guys want to talk about it, go right ahead. You guys need a safe place to talk about it as well. If any of you have any questions, come back to, dad and mom and I, and let's have a conversation. So, and so you're creating more of an open environment, but you're also not giving them more details than they want to understand. And you're also not telling them more info than the two of you have decided.
Yeah.
Also, if a kid comes to one of you and says, hey, I have a question, you can say, you know what, that's a great question. I'm going to write it down. Let me talk to my spouse, and either I or we will get back to you. And so that way you keep it so that, let's say, a betrayed partner in this case isn't taking liberty to share details without
Right.
the consent of the other partner, and or vice versa. Like, the two of you are working on your relationship, so work on being a team.
Yes.
Work on being a united team together with your children. And so your kids come to you, you know what, that's a great question. Let me talk to mom or dad about that. And I'm going to get back to you, and then get back to them. So Scott, anything else I'm missing here?
A couple things that I will add, and you can agree or disagree. Even if you and your partner are divorcing, present the information as a team. Um,
Totally agree.
and that's number one. And number two, if the kids are 8, 10, and 12 instead of 20, 22, all of these rules still apply, but what you tell them might be a little different. Like, yes, something is going on. And you make sure when they're younger, especially, they know it's not their fault. You're working on it. They don't need to worry about it. It's not, they didn't cause
Right.
it. They can't fix it. That's what littler kids need to know. So any
Right.
elaboration?
And you're great additions. In addition to that, for little kids, it would be, and anytime you're worried about it, come talk to us. Anytime you're wondering if it's your fault, come talk to us. Like, and so any concerns you have, bring it up anytime you want. Maybe let's not do it in the middle of church really loudly,
Right.
but let's do it in a private space, but let's talk about it anytime you're curious. No, those
Yeah.
are phenomenal additions.
Yeah. Um, that was a great question. And yeah, let's go to the next one here. What should you do when you ask your spouse? This is, I think, is an addict who's asking his betrayed partner how his betrayed partner's feeling. I'm doing the male-female judgment. What should you do when you ask your spouse how they feel and their response is to not share their feelings, simply to repeat their accusation?
Right. And I would say I would probably respond this way, and let's play with this for a second. My instinct is to say, hey, I'm hearing that you're hurt, or I'm hearing that you're scared. I'm hearing that you're confused. So what I'm going to do is, if I've asked them to share their feelings and they give me, an accusation or whatever, they say the same thing over again, most likely in their own way, they are sharing their feelings. So then I'm going to say, okay, so it sounds like you're hurting. Well, of course I'm hurting. Ah, okay. And so you're mad too? Yeah, I'm mad. What do you expect? No, I expect you to be mad. Like, so now I'm going to present to them almost in an empathy way, right? Like, here's what I hear that you're feeling. Am I getting that right? Okay, what else are you feeling? Right? Like, so I'm going to draw them into their emotions by showing them that I can hear their emotions instead of, well, I can't believe you're accusing me again, right? Like, well, of course you're accusing me again. You're hurt. It's frustrating because I'm in a good place and I haven't done anything wrong, but I don't blame you for feeling that way because you're scared, right? So hopefully this is giving you some direction that when you go to somebody and you ask them how they feel, most people make the mistake of telling you what they're thinking, not what they're feeling. And so if they come back and give you an accusation, they're telling you what they're thinking, even if they think they're telling you what they're feeling, because what they're doing is telling you their thoughts that are driving the emotion. So then I'm now listening for what are the emotions underneath the thoughts, and I'm reflecting those back. And that will pull out their emotion better than anything. Even asking them how they feel, just start reflecting the emotion back. Now, that requires a empathy skill set, and good on you. Start practicing.
Yeah, it's slow it down and be curious and take a risk and guess if they're not telling you sometimes. Gosh, if I was in your shoes right now, under my anger, I'd also be feeling fear and confusion. Are you feeling any fear or confusion? Well, yeah, I'm confused about this and afraid of this. Oh, and then and to me, this is the crux of empathy is, once I know intellectually how you're feeling, now I'm back to this intellectual emotional thing. If I care about you at all, I'm going to have a reaction. Now, I may not feel what you're feeling, but I may feel something inside of me, like shame or like, oh my God, I didn't mean to do that, or that's genuine, as opposed to me mansplaining why I did what I did, or why you should
Right.
forgive me for doing what I did, which is what a lot of addicts do. Um, so, and you're absolute. By the way, this inability or unwillingness or just skipping over the feelings to tell you what we're thinking, um, goes both ways. I mean, Matt, you work with addicts too. You'll say, "How are you feeling today?" And they'll start telling you what they're thinking or what their wife did or
Right.
what their wife, and it's like, no, I asked you what you were feeling. Yeah.
Well, and I'll tell you, I think honestly, most humans, I mean, whether I'm working with men or women or otherwise, um, will tell you their thoughts when you ask them their feeling. And I've often wondered, is there something in our culture? And I'm sure the answer is yes, but it makes me wonder if in another language, if it still happens in another language as well. How are you feeling? So they tell you your thoughts, right? Like I'm curious on different cultures because if somebody asks me how I'm feeling, right, I'm going, I'm pretty content. Maybe a little bit of thoughtfulness at the moment, maybe even a tinge of loneliness. Like it's like,
Yeah.
but we don't typically expect that in our culture. It's, hey, how you feeling? I'm good.
I'm great. I'm okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for asking.
Well, and I remember when I really started to learn this, and it was after I became a therapist and was doing this all day. I remember being in a social environment where people would regularly ask me, how you doing? And I started to say, are you really wanting to know? Or
Yeah.
are you just being friendly?
Somewhere early in recovery, I realized like the grocery store check would be like, "Are you having a good day?" And I'd start answering in full. And I realized the grocery store checker doesn't care. That's when I get to
Oh,
say, "Oh, I'm having a great day. Thanks for
they're just
asking."
being polite.
Yeah. But when my therapist or my spouse or somebody says, "How are you feeling?" they might actually want an answer. Um,
Yeah, and it was probably that same realization for me that it was like I just need to answer in a polite fashion. They really don't want to know. And then I have other friends who be like, "Hey man, how you doing?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm being honest.
yeah,
If I really dig down, let me tell you."
yeah. So, and you mentioned our other possible topic was staying present with your spouse. Um, let's talk about that for a second because I mean, and again, I will speak for myself as an addict. I didn't want to be present for my own feelings, let alone yours. So you'd be telling me something, and I would be formulating my answer before you had even gotten halfway through what you were telling me because I didn't want to deal with what you were telling me. Is
Yeah.
that kind of what you're talking about, our inability to stay present, and what can we do about it?
Yeah, I mean, that definitely is there. Let me do this real quick because there was the very first comment that came in the Q&A basically said, "Sorry, this question doesn't follow along with what you guys are talking about today." And I just want to make sure because I never saw that person actually ask a question. So
Oh, it
maybe
was the
they
next
asked it at
question, I think.
maybe it was, but
Yeah.
if you meant to put a question in, uh, please put it in. But to answer that question about presence, like there's a couple of things going on with presence. Like one, if I don't even know how to do presence as a person, right? Like I have to figure out what that block is about. I've spent my whole life that I truly just don't even have the awareness of what it's like to be present. And when I said I'm going to come in with a topic around being present, it was less complicated than that problem where I could try and teach somebody how to be present. Here's some tools on being present, which is probably what I was going to bring to you guys as a topic. But when you're working with somebody um who has spent their entire life not even understanding that being present is a thing, there are no tools that are going to help them understand that. There's a David Foster Wallace, like he was an author. He said one time that there's these two smaller fish that were swimming and an older fish swimming by, if I remember it right. and the older fish says, "Hey boys, how's the water?" And the one fish turns to the other and is like, "What the hell is water?" Right? Like, to try and tell somebody, "Hey, you need to learn to be present," and they have spent their entire life numbing out in addiction and teaching them how to be present. It's like, what's water?
Yeah.
So sorry, I don't know if this is too much of a sidetrack, but
No,
like,
it really is like, and I think this ties into empathy so well is addicts. One of the first things we have to learn is to actually not numb every feeling that comes our way. And then we have to learn how to sit with the feelings and identify them and figure out where they came from. And, and realize that, just because I'm feeling this way right now, I might be feeling differently in 5 minutes. And, you know, there's a whole batch of just being present for life that it needs to happen before we can even think about empathy, pretty much. So anyway, we had some other questions that came in, so let's jump to them if we can. I love this one. My husband, the addict, has reached capacity for conversation about our life. This is 2 years after D-Day, and I'm still grieving, not abnormal. He said he still doesn't know or understand his feelings and that everything pokes him. I'm feeling so alone. And here's the question: what can I do to keep his shame at bay, or can I?
that is such a good question,
Isn't it? Yeah.
because the greatest block to empathy is shame.
Mhm.
The way I try to describe empathy is really, or sorry, to describe shame is to separate it into two batches. You have internal shame, which is the one we all think about, which is to understand that I believe about myself that I'm a bad person, something's wrong with me, and I'm broken. That's the shame that most of us heal first in recovery, is that we start to believe that we're a lovable person, and we get to a place where we believe that despite all the stupid things I've done and all the people I've hurt, I still am worthy of love and being loved. That takes a lot of work. The second part of shame that I try and teach people is still an internalized concept, but I call it external shame because it's the belief that I have that everyone else believes that I'm worthless. And so I have to then start to believe not only that I'm lovable, but I have to start to believe that other people might actually see me as lovable and worthy of love. And I've found that a lot of people, if you start loving on your husband in this instance, and he is like, "I don't know and understand my feelings," which may be very true, which, don't let me forget, there's an app that I really like that helps people learn feelings. So I'll try and remember that. But when he's like, everything pokes him and he's feeling so alone, I would probably try and ask him, are you feeling like, do you feel unlovable, or do you feel everyone feels you're unlovable, or is it both? And and then I'm going to start asking, instead of trying to take his shame away or keep it at bay, because I'm going to argue you can't control it. Don't even try, because at that point you're trying to manage his shame, and that's just as unhealthy as you trying to manage his emotions. Now, you don't need to be mean and try to like, "Well, I don't care about your shame. Matt says I can say whatever I want." It's like, no, like, you can be mindful and aware, which, by the way, I've found that that's not super common, but it still happens. So I'm not saying you would have done that naturally, but what you can do is, instead of either trying to manage the shame or keep it at bay or whatever, you can now just say, "I'm going to start asking questions about your shame. Hey, you feel like you don't know your feelings and you're feeling so alone. Um, Tell me how often you feel this. Does it only come up when I bring up this subject, or does it come up all the time around all sorts of things?" And like, you start getting curious about the shame. And the idea is that the more we learn to understand our shame, the more we talk about it, the more we put it out into the light, the more that it decreases. And so you don't want to do anything to hide the shame, but you can also learn, oh, I brought your shame up. Okay, well, we can pause here. We don't need to bring up more shame, but I can sit with this much shame and let's talk a little bit about it.
Yeah. And you know, Brene Brown has the best quote I've ever heard about shame. Shame thrives in darkness, it withers in sunlight. I love the idea of asking him about his shame. And he can say, well, I just feel unlovable and I feel like I'm not worthy of you. And then you can say, you know, I discovered you're cheating 2 years ago and I'm still here. Um, Maybe you are lovable. Let's work from that, you know. But yeah, it's shame is an inside job, really, and healing from shame. We just have to get it out. If I can tell a group of people my shame and nobody runs away screaming, it really helps to kill some of my shame. Um, you know, so yeah. Um, the adult kids question was the one that
Oh,
was going to be asked. Oh, go ahead. Oh,
the app.
yeah.
There's an app. It's free, and it says that it's been made available by donations, and so there's no ads or anything. And I think the app is so well done. It's called How We Feel. Have you heard of that one, Scott?
I have several, I haven't used it, but I have several of my guides who use it and they swear by it. They love
Yeah,
it.
it's so good at helping people learn to really recognize their emotions, because it starts out and it's like four squares. It's not squares, but basically that's what it is. And it's like high energy positive, low energy positive, low energy negative, high energy negative. And you click on it and it opens up this whole array, and you can go through and just look at the definitions of each emotion, and you click on it, and you can even add a second one so you're feeling multiple emotions at one time. And you can journal about it while you're doing it. You can schedule it to remind you to give daily checkups. I just think it's phenomenally done. It's free. I think everybody should be using it, especially if they feel like they're not well acquainted with their own emotional states. Did I lose you, Scott?
I'm back. Sorry about that. I
There
did
you
warn
are.
you, it's bad when it's hot. We have one more question. I'm going to give you the short version of it. This is after a long history of affairs. There's now been 3 years in a full therapeutic disclosure. Um, and this is a question from the betrayed partner. He is now telling me that he will never be able to fake all the things like empathy. He says he can be respectful, faithful, and helpful in our relationship, but he cannot do all this emotional work. Do you think our relationship has a chance? Um,
This is a really good question, and I'm going to answer it very simply. Every relationship has a chance if you're willing to accept the level of work that they are either capable or willing to do. I've seen people stay in a relationship when active addiction's gone on, and they say, you know what? If this is the best that they can give me, I'm going to stay in it. And I have an understanding of how to take care of myself, and I'm going to get healthy, whether they do or not. And I've seen people stay, and I'm not one to judge anymore. I've seen people leave relationships when I to me it seemed like there was maybe even the indiscretion wasn't as bad as, or hardly, what feels like it's hardly bad at all, and yet they leave the relationship. There's a huge gamut. The real question is, do you think your relationship has a chance? Can you stay in a relationship where he can be respectful, faithful, and helpful, but not emotional? And I think that's a question that everybody has to figure out, uh, because I think it's actually healthy for all of us in every relationship we have to say, if this is the best the relationship gets, am I content? Like, sure, I'd like it to be better. Sure, I'd like to improve. But if I sit and think about that, I guarantee you my wife's like, yeah, I'd like Matt to be a little bit better, at doing the dishes, and she has to decide, you know what? I'm gonna keep him, even though he doesn't do the dishes, right? Like, and I mean, we all have to figure out, and I know that I don't mean to like trivialize, like, because I imagine you're thinking, shoot, if all he didn't do was the dishes, then we'd be great, right? But the reality of it is that every relationship that any of us are in, we have to decide what's our minimum standard, or is this a minimum that I could stay in and be content and happy and at peace, and hope that he does the emotional work, but I can't push it. I think that's where we develop what are referred to as relational agreements. He's telling you, I can be respectful, I can be faithful, I can be helpful. I can't be emotional. It's not going to happen. And you have to go, well, is that a relational agreement that I can agree with?
Yeah, it's are you getting enough of your needs met in this relationship that you want to stay in it? And I think there are probably a lot of people out there that would kill for respectful, faithful, and helpful. They'd be like, "Oh yeah, I'm in."
Yeah,
Um,
but at the same
but
time, I don't blame you for leaving if you decide to leave. Meaning,
absolutely,
don't I worry because what you're saying, Scott, is absolutely correct. There are people who will be like respectful, faithful, and helpful, but not emotional. I'll kill for that, right? Like I'll
right,
totally, and at the same time, no
yeah,
judgment for the person who says,
right,
I can't do it. That's not what I signed up for.
yeah. If that's not enough, it's not enough. We all have different attachment style. All have different relational needs, and yeah, Matt's right. You have to decide for you if this can work. So yeah. We're out of time. We are out of questions. Matt, wonderful to see you again.
Yeah.
Everybody, Matt will be back in 2 weeks. Probably Tammy will be back with him. She had family stuff today, so I got to fill in. So thank you everybody for being here. We'll see you
Good,
soon.
good job, everybody, for your vulnerability. Love the questions, and we'll see you guys soon.